Let's take a look at two things you can do in your timeline that can improve your workflow and efficiency. One is the ability to turn off the visibility or turn off the sound of tracks, and the other is locking tracks. Now, the advantage of being able to turn off a video track is, for instance, let's say I wanted to put out a version of my show without the lower thirds. I could simply click on any of the eyeballs at the head of a track, and that track will no longer be visible, and when I export the video, that track won't be exported. This is very useful in situations where, say, you need to put out a version without lower thirds. You can also put out a version, say, without the narrator track. So for instance, if I wanted to turn off some of my audio, I would go down here, but instead of seeing an eyeball, I see the letters M for mute and S for solo. Mute actually would turn off a track. So in this case, we would no longer hear any of the audio on track 1. And in this situation, that would be myself and Vanessa speaking. If you're in a newsroom, you may need to send out a version of your show without a narrator so that the receiving station can put their own anchor or narrator into the program. Now, complementing mute is solo. This just simply isolates a track so I can hear that track all by itself. Very useful when mixing audio, and perhaps I want to listen or export a version without, say, my music. Now let me go ahead and turn back on those two video tracks, and I want to show you one more very useful technique. First, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing a little closer. I'll press the plus key. Now I can right-click on this track, and I can choose to uncheck Enable, and that will make that clip invisible. That way you don't have to turn off an entire timeline to see what's below a clip. Now, you can do that by right-clicking, or you can select all of the clips that you may want to enable or disable, and use the keyboard shortcut Shift-Command-E as in Enable on a Mac, or Shift-Control-E on a Windows machine. So I can very quickly turn on and off multiple clips instead of turning on and off tracks or going through one at a time, enabling or disabling them. Another technique that's very useful is the ability to lock a track. Now, we saw this in an earlier video, and I can do that by simply clicking on this little open lock icon. When it closes, I see cross-hatching on my video track, which means I can't make any modifications to it. And this is very useful if I want to do some editing and I don't want to accidentally either shift my video or overwrite it. Now, I can do the same thing with my audio, and I often do this when I'm cutting anything to music. Now, whether I do an insert or an overwrite, that audio track won't be affected. As you can see, locking and unlocking tracks, as well as turning on the visibility or muting and soloing a track, can be very useful when cutting together your video.